Today I'm doing a demonstration drawing in a square with a Root 5 grid. I'm using a charcoal pencil, some erasing, and a bit of smudging. The drawing is going to be low middle key with dark deviations. As always, when drawing with value, I'm trying to create form using shapes of value and not outlining and filling in. So I start with a square that already has a Root 5 division on it. Then I'm going to use my compass to measure that distance and transfer it to the top of the square. You could also mark that distance using a piece of paper like we've done before and just transfer that distance to the top of the square. So from the top corner down, now I have a Root 5 measurement that I'm going to draw a horizontal line across. So I'll have a Root 5 division on the top and a Root 5 division on the bottom. So here I am lining up, make my horizontal line. So there, Root 5 on top, Root 5 on bottom. Now what I want to do is put a Root 5 vertically on the left and the right. So there's the left, there's the right, and I just take my compass, measure the distance of the height, mark it on the right and mark it on the left. Then I just have to draw two vertical lines. As always, I have a hard time lining up my tool. So then I'm going to mark my vertical. And then I had problems on this side because I didn't realize there was a sticky piece of tape that kept stopping up my measuring square. So I couldn't get it exactly where I wanted it to. So I fudge around with it a little bit right here. Finally, I figured out there was something stopping me. So then I had to flatten that tape out. Then I could slide my tool back and forth. Yes, now I can line it up. Make my vertical, and there you go. I have a Root 5 on the bottom, a Root 5 on the top, a Root 5 on the left and the right, and I have this skinny little cross in the middle. So here I am loosely laying out my lights and darks using my sharpened, extra soft charcoal pencil. You can see that I'm just, like I've done before, just loosely laying things out, not outlining things, kind of just keeping a broad sense of where things are darker and where they're lighter. I can trust in the process and know that if I keep drawing in this way, that I can gradually bring my drawing up to the level of finish that I want it to be. So I think you can tell that there's an area on the left that is light, and everything else is a little bit darker than that. And then little by little, you'll start seeing what the actual darkest things are. They start coming out on the right and through the middle. And I'm just using the sort of quick, loose back and forth with my hand and sort of filling in the white spaces as I go. Don't have to start off as dark as it's going to be. Just need to have something that's darker than the lightest light so that I can tell where, in general, my lights and darks are. So on our last assignment, some of you had issues with understanding keying the whole drawing. You may have made the objects dark, light, or middle, but you didn't think about the whole format. So what I'm trying to show you here is that the drawing is the whole thing from the edges in. And so you have to think about how you're dealing with the edges and how you're dealing with the corners and where there's subtle variations in the ground as well as in the object. So the value structure here is becoming clear. There's definitely that light area in the upper left, and there's definitely that dark area in the lower right. Everything else is kind of in between those two. But as I draw, I start making that part of the apple on the right get darker and darker. I'm always keeping my dark area, my darkest area, darker than everything else. I'm always keeping my lightest area lighter than everything else. All right, so here we've got our drawing laid out, lights and darks, and I think my tape was coming up, so I had to push it back down a little bit right there. Still rough, my drawing's still rough. There's still a lot of white spaces between my marks, and just trying to come back into it with a loose wash flowing, not being too careful at this stage. I want to keep some energy and life into it. I intend to let this get fairly well developed, but in the meantime I want to build it up and let the internal life develop. I had to pull out the big tape because my little tape wasn't holding my paper down. It was pretty heavy paper I was working with, and the tape I had put down initially was pulling up. So here I do a little bit of maintenance. Get it laid down. Sorry for the delay. There, now we're ready. So back to loose, flowing motion, not using too much pressure, letting the charcoal build up slowly. I really do think of, when I'm drawing, I think of the materials I'm using as stuff. I don't like to make images, but I like to think of the material as a thing in itself and figure out how to use it. I really think about, I'm moving charcoal around, I'm not just making a picture. This is just a lot of working with the texture of the tones that I'm laying down, minimizing the texture some, especially in the top. It's still pretty textural on the bottom. So just trying to get things set up, starting to get more precise. Sorry about the camera being a little bumped off there. Here I'm starting to smooth out the bottom and getting it a little darker. And as I do, I start seeing the slight variations in dark and light in that dark area. So it's not just one big black area, there's some variations within that. And same with that right side right there, there's some variations in that. I'm starting to bring the value of the right side of the apple down, but not jumping to as dark as it needs to go. Paying some attention to that stem, which I don't think of as just a line, it's a little shape and it deserves attention. So I build it up as I build everything else up. So here I am modeling the apple and working with the cast shadows and smoothing out some of my marks. Getting some more of the little details in the apple that I wouldn't pay attention to early on, but as the form starts to build, then I can start playing with those little details. Getting that curve on the apple, increasing the depth of the shadow, this cast shadow. Sort of carving around the edge of the apple to try to get its shape more precise, Sharpen your pencils. So you'll notice that on the right there's a strong contrast between the side of the apple, and on the left the apple sort of blends into the ground. So jump forward a little bit. I think I did some work on this without the camera being on. But you can see that it's high contrast on the right side of the apple, lower contrast on the left side of the apple. Here I am getting into the dark shadow of the apple and getting some variation in it. Starting to smooth out the bottom marks a little bit, really saturating that shadow that's cast by the apple. Working on drawing around a light area, but it's not super light, so I'm making it look light by drawing around it. Getting the core of that cast shadow pretty dark. Here I'm also working in the light area of the apple, but the lightest highlight is right there, so I'm drawing around it to make it look lighter. And if I want that to be the lightest thing, I have to have everything else darker than it, so I'm just sort of washing over other things to darken them up just a little bit. Here I'm using a pencil that instead of having graphite in it, has an eraser in it. And instead of thinking about erasing as a way to remove mistakes, I think about erasing as a way of putting in lighter areas. And also this kind of pencil will kind of smooth out your mark. So as I draw, I think you can see I bring a little light in, but I also can sort of smooth things out a little bit. This is a tool that I usually don't use until near the end of the drawing because it's a refining tool for me. One thing I'm doing is going along the edges where darks and lights meet and sort of creating a transition between those. Now, a lot of times I will tell y'all not to smudge with your fingers in your drawings because fingers can leave sort of oily deposits and marks that you can't get rid of. At this point, my drawing has a coat of charcoal all over the entire page or all over the entire format. So what my fingers touch when I smudge with my finger is just charcoal, so I'm not leaving those fingerprints on it. So this is in the last stage of this drawing. What I'm doing is using a little bit of smudging with my finger, a little bit of erasing with the eraser pencil, a little bit of drawing with the charcoal pencil, and whenever I erase out, if I build up any kind of erasure residue on my drawing, I'll use my brush to sweep it off gently. And as you can see, I'm just trying to refine the lights and darks. This is the fun part. This is what everything was leading up to. You don't want to start like this. You can't start like this. Everything built up to this point, so I can really play around with how light or dark subtle differences are, how much I want to bring out a bruise, or if there's any little marks on the skin of the apple or subtle little shadows. Here, I took a picture so you get to see my camera, my phone taking a picture of the drawing that I'm doing because I wanted to have just a still shot of this. So again, I'm just doing very subtle adjustments to the light and dark. Not making, at this point, there's no reason to make any big moves because you did that all earlier. Just going around that stem, trying to refine it a little bit. Smoothing out the background. Working with the cast shadow a little bit. That's just about it. I hope this helped you. I look forward to seeing your drawings.